Hello, friends. It's a delight to be with you today. As president of the Samuel Bronfman Foundation, Adam R. Bronfman is committed to furthering Edgar M. Bronfman's vision of inspiring a vibrant and joyful Jewish future by working to build a knowledgeable, proud, and welcoming community. As a member of Hillel's International Board of Governors, Adam has visited numerous Hillels in North America. He has been a catalyst behind the growth of Hillels internationally. His new film is called The Con, which is an in-depth investigation into the 2008 financial crisis, 9 years in the making. Adam, who I know personally, is a moral visionary, an activist and change maker, and a thought leader who only asks big, hard questions for us to grapple with. And so I'm delighted to have this chance to talk with you about this film. Thank you for taking time.
Thank you, Shmuly. It's great to be here with you, always.
So why did you take this on? I mean, what a huge undertaking to produce a film like this. Something that few are talking about or have thought about in depth. Why did you take this on?
Well, I originally took this on because, and this is a very long project in the making. This is the better part of a decade. And it just seemed that America was going in the wrong direction, and that ultimately a nation that was supposed to be of, by, and for the people, that allowed anybody to have value. And that really, that was the American dream as I saw it, was that any of us could have value in our country, that we were being left out, and that corporate America, and particularly the banks, were taking over. And I felt that as we understood the gravity of the situation and how impactful the 2008 financial crisis was, and that the information we were hearing about it was actually wrong, we should tell the truth, that we needed to hear the truth. And along the journey, we found out that the idea that people were really not overwhelmingly harmed was not true, that the harm done to particularly the weakest Americans, the people at the bottom of the economic scale, anywhere from sort of like the bottom half, they're just decimated, and they are still being brutalized by the truth that has come out, that is the American economic system at this point. And so ultimately, I stuck with it because nobody else seemed to want to do it. The three of us, Eric Vaughn and Patrick Lovell and I, decided this is a valuable story. We really, really believe that people want to hear it, and the truth needs to come out.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So when you wanted to put the truth out, what was it that you were hoping or are continuing to hope to achieve with that? Where do you think we go from here?
Well, I don't know. Ultimately, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm an executive producer, and my hope is that I can bring information to people that they don't have. And I can put it out there in a way. This is a relatively complicated subject. To understand how someone who has been the victim of predatory lending is connected to a sales associate at an investment bank who's selling to a pension fund, where's that connection, right? We make that very clear, that the entire financial system is connected, and that the predation, the illegal activity that's happening when someone knocks on your door and sells you a loan and cheats you out of the value of your home, ultimately, how that's connected to every other aspect of the financial system and ends up hurting people on the other side of investments, the investors. It's complicated. We make it relatively simple to understand, and we make it relatively simple to understand how the federal government has ultimately become a client of big business, and most importantly, the banks, and that they're standing by and letting this happen. And it's costing all of us. It's costing all of us. And I think everybody needs to know that this wasn't just a an anomaly that happened that could be explained in the movie The Big Short. And not that the information there is untrue, it is true, but the reality is that it wasn't just something where a few people could see the anomaly happening and make a lot of money off of it. There was an economic collapse, and it was caused by the banks. And that economic collapse hurt all Americans. It hurt the people who were being, who were losing their homes, the people who were losing their pensions, and all of us who pay taxes, because we ended up shoveling out $29 trillion to save the banks and the American economic system because of this criminal activity. People should know that, Shmuly. People should know what really happened.
Yeah.
And to say that, as we've heard from our government and from the newsmakers on CNBC and the other financial news, that this was unethical but not illegal, that's just not true. We know it's not true. We show it's not true in the column.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question below the surface, a deeper question. Why do you think such corruption exists? Do you think this is greed is essential to the human condition, to human nature? I mean, do you think this is an anomaly in human history, what we're seeing here? It's just the scale was that much bigger and the deception was that much more hidden? Or do you think this is fundamental to the human story?
I think it's fundamental to the human story. I think absolutely that greed and predation is a knee-jerk reaction. When we can amass power and wealth, there are people who will do that, and there are many people who do that with no regard to moral or ethical or legal boundaries. And that's why we have systems. That's why we have religious systems. That's why we have moral systems. That's why we have ethical systems that undergird our governmental systems. Your government isn't supposed to be something that's just arbitrary. It's supposed to protect the goodness and the value of society. And ultimately, I think that really you and I have spent so much time talking about this from a Jewish perspective, that Judaism and in many ways all these systems say we need to protect against the evil impulses, the impulses of greed and predation that exist in the world. And when people violate those norms, they either need to be dealt with in a moral way, or sometimes in a criminal way. When it crosses the line to criminality, we need to say, no, you may not do that, and that the people in our society have value, and that treating people in a moral, ethical way is required. And if you don't, we're going to put you outside the confines of our society.
Yeah. So, picking up on that as maybe a last question here, this is a Jewish film. This is a Jewish film. It should be shown in Jewish film festivals and JCCs, at federations and synagogues. It's not a Jewish film in that they're studying Talmud and eating matzah balls, right? But it's a Jewish film in that the prophets and the sages were obsessed with economic justice. The prophets and sages were obsessed with truth-telling. They were obsessed with what mattered most, and that was corruption and greed and Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination overtaking the human spirit, where people lose their sense of empathy, they lose their sense of compassion, they lose their sense of justice. So this is a Jewish film. And I wonder, what in your own Jewish value system, because I know it's so rich for you, what in your own Jewish value system kind of, inspires you to do such work of truth-telling?
I grew up in a home where I was not brought up in a home that had a lot of Jewish ritual as its basis. My father in the 70s and 80s, my father was going through his own rebellion, and his work was in Jewish leadership, but not necessarily Jewish ritual. And what he said to me was, your job as a human being is to leave this world a little bit better than you found. And I don't have the ability, I don't have the financial ability to go and right these wrongs. We see so much in the world that needs fixing. We see so much repair that is needed. And ultimately, what I realized that is that I can have a message. I can tell the truth, and I can show where right is in terms of this particular relatively small but society-wide problem. And I can have people who understand how legal systems of banking and finance is supposed to work. And when it doesn't work, what happens to society? And that people are decimated. And ultimately, the Jewish value, right, is ultimately, when we look at it, is that we need to have a working society and that does not victimize people, because people are holy. People are more important than just their financial net worth. I think it is one of the reasons why I think that the Jewish sages were obsessed with these equitable norms of doing business and financial norms that have to be dealt with, is so that when they're in their correct place, we can rise above that and be wonderful people, and we can be fathers and mothers and stewards of the community. And if we don't, then we got sucked into this monetized value system that really is outside the norms. So, the idea that we can have a messaging that is based on Jewish values that explains what's going wrong, to me will help people to understand what needs to happen, which is you need to have an equitable moral system, and hopefully that will help people realize that there's a better world out there. And if I can message that and bring this truth to tens of millions of people, I will have done more than feeding 100. Mm-hmm. Like I go to the food bank. I go down to and help give water and food to people on Skid Row, right? But I feel so I feel like the problem is so far beyond anything I can personally do. Yeah. This is something where I can have an impact. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, if going to the con.tv, watching our series, recommending it to your friends, posting it on Facebook allows people to see the truth. Because the fact of the matter is that teachers and widows and carpenters and civil servants did not pull a fast one on the most sophisticated financial minds in the history of man. Realize that the people who took down our system are MBAs from Harvard and Stanford and Yale and the University of Chicago. These are the smartest financial minds in the history of this world. They weren't duped by the average American citizen. They were not. And the fact that that's the message that was brought to us is truly vile. Yeah. It's truly vile to think that Addie Polk, an African-American woman in Akron, Ohio, pulled a fast one on Countrywide. It's just not true. The reality is that she was a victim of predatory lending, and that she decided to commit suicide rather than be thrown out of a house that she actually owned outright. And it's really sad.
Friends, one of the top 3 ways I speak about of Jewish learning is our ability to slow down and reflect on the past crises on a personal level, on a communal level, on a national and a global level, in order that we can not replicate and relive such crises in the future, that we can learn from those. Whether we're talking about the temple being destroyed in exile 2,000 years ago, and we think about that, whether we think about the Holocaust and genocide of 70 years ago and more, whether we think about any of these crises we've had in our personal lives, to be able to slow down and reflect on past crises so that we can create a more just and equitable world for the future. We don't have the answers necessarily, at least I don't, as to how we're going to get to the more just future, but we need to slow down and understand the history of what has happened. The Khan is a part of that Jewish learning process. To understand only 12 years ago, the 2008 crisis, financial crisis, understand what happened, how people were duped, the levels of abuse and corruption and greed that are a problem, and just on the simple level of understanding it, hearing the story and understanding the facts. That is a part of Jewish learning, because that's what we're here to do, to make sure crises like these do not happen again. And so, Adam Bronfman, we're in debt to you for producing this. And friends, we hope you will, if you get anything from this interview, watch the film. Watch the film. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shmuly. Thank you so much.